There's currently a totally crazy sunset behind me. I really hope I can get some good pictures and show how to edit them, because this is going to be a really good example of how to use a raw picture. Good morning everyone. Yesterday while walking my dog, there was an amazing sunset that I captured using my Google Pixel 4a. For those of you who are new to this channel, I'm Bellemare-Alford, a young photographer and filmmaker on a journey to become better at this art. I asked on YouTube which editing software I should be using on my cell phone for this video, and the vast majority of you answered to use Snapseed. So let's set up the shot and get right into it. Now let's get to editing the shots. So if you want to find your file right now, it's actually not in the main camera folder here when you open Google Photos. You actually need to go inside of Library here and go inside of the raw folder. And inside of the raw folder, then you're gonna have access to the different shots, raw shots right here. I actually have another folder with my edits here, so I'm going to go inside of this one, and you can see the picture that we're going to be editing is this one right here. But if we zoom in side of it, you're going to see it's actually terrible. There's no detail at all. And don't stress out, because raw pictures actually include a JPEG preview, but it's a very low quality JPEG preview, only to be able to create thumbnails inside of the operating systems or things like that. So what we're going to do is actually come inside of Snapseed. So we're going to go on the screen here and search for Snapseed, open the app up, and this edit works on iOS or Android. Whether you have a Google Pixel, a Samsung device, an iPhone device, Snapseed works on all devices, and it's completely free and there's no ads. So for this, it's a really great app, so you can use it wherever you are. So we're going to click here, and actually it opened my raw folder because I went there before, but I actually have it inside of Google Photos here. So I'm going to go inside of here, find my folder with the sunset edit, select the raw file, and if you see this little icon on the top here, that actually shows that it's a raw picture. So if we select this one, it's going to open inside of the develop module. And how Snapseed works when you get inside of the setting like here, it's actually, if you swipe up and down, you get different settings that you can change. And if you swipe right to left, you're changing that setting. And if you look at the top of the screen right here, you're going to see it shows which setting we're affecting. So here, if we look at the exposure and we bring down the exposure, we see there's a lot of detail inside of the highlights of the picture. And if we bring it up, we're going to see there's a lot of detail also in the shadows, but there's quite a lot of noise inside of the shadows here. So that's one thing you need to keep in mind when editing the shot. So we're actually going to bring down the exposure quite a lot, because usually you don't want to have the highlights that are clipping. You prefer having dark shadows than highlights that are too bright. So we're going to bring it down about somewhere here. We're going to go inside of the highlights and we're going to bring them completely down. This is pretty common when you're editing a sunset shot. Usually the highlights are going to be too overexposed, so you can bring the highlights completely down. Then we're going to bring up the shadows, and one thing I didn't like with the edit that the phone did automatically was that the shadows were too bright. So I'm going to bring them up a little bit. That's maybe not enough, so I'm going to go back in exposure and just bring back the exposure a little bit over the shot here. So I think this is looking pretty decently good. If we go in contrast, we want to bring a little bit more contrast, but be careful. Bringing up too much contrast makes everything dark, really dark, and everything bright, very bright. So we might just bring a little bit just to add a little bit more definition. Structure, we're not going to touch it right now. It's a little bit like sharpness, but I don't really like the result it gives. If we push it to the maximum here, we see it creates this really weird results inside of the sky. So I'm not going to use structure for now. Saturation, we can bring it up just a little bit, but that's really one area you shouldn't do. A lot of people, when you're editing a shot, especially when you're a beginner, and that's one thing I used to do, is you want to bring the saturation up to get all these colors inside of the sky, but this doesn't look good at all. This is terrible. We're going to bring saturation up on the colors, but in another way. So we're just going to bring it up, let's say to around, I would say 8, something like that, just to bring up a little bit of the colors, but not too much to be really annoying. Then temperature here, be very careful. So if you bring it up too much, it's going to become too warm. That's weird. If you bring it down too much, it's going to be too blue. So I actually want it to be somewhere around, I would say something like this. I think is pretty good. maybe a little bit too blue. So let's come back here and really just play with it. If you're not sure what temperature you should be putting, you can go in white balance here and you can select different settings. And this is the advantage of having a raw. You can change the temperature as you wish afterwards. So once you're finished with this tint, we're not going to touch it. We're going to leave it like that. Once you're satisfied with the result, actually we might bring it down just a little bit to compensate that it's more blue now. And I think something like that is pretty good. So now once you're done with the develop module, you can click here to exit it. And they're going to open automatically some styles that are suggested, but we don't want to do this because we actually want to edit completely by ourselves. So we're going to go inside of tools, and this is where Snapseed really shines. There's a lot of tools that are available. The first thing we're going to do is go inside of detail here, and instead of using structure that opens by default, we're going to go in sharpening, and we're going to bring the sharpening up quite a lot. So if we zoom inside of the branches here, so you need to use 2 fingers to zoom inside of here, and we go back on sharpening and we bring up the sharpening, we're going to see it really brings some detail inside of the trees here. So we're probably going to bring it around something like 55 to really bring that sharpness out of the shot. And this is actually what Google does on all their shots. They bring up the sharpness really a lot. Then we're going to go inside of selective, and this is my favorite tool inside of Snapseed. And selective, what selective allows you to do is to point a color inside of the picture. So if we come here, we're going to use the colors here inside of the sunset, and you long press. When you long press, you have this little selector that appears. You can come here, and then you have a few settings for that. So you can affect the brightness of this, so you can bring it down a little bit. So usually on colors on the sunset, it's a good idea to bring them down. It's going to make them pop a little bit more. We can then bring up the contrast. We can then bring up the saturation a little bit on these colors only, and might bring up the structure just a touch bit on these colors. And this uses what you call a technology that's called U-point. So it basically means that if you point a color on the screen, so you can add another one here. If we point a color on the screen, it's going to allow us to affect the colors that are that are similar around the point we selected. So if we select the sky here, we're going to be able to bring it down a little bit. So I just want to bring it down a touch bit. Might want to bring the saturation up a little bit on the sky. So now we see that the sky at the top is a little bit darker, but at the bottom here is still pretty bright. So we're going to come in here and affect the colors around here. So we're going to add another point here in the bottom. So we're going to go where it's more or less blue here. And again, we're going to bring this one down just a touch bit. We're going to go in saturation, bring the saturation up a little bit. And the last point I'm going to add is right in the middle of the sunset here. There's another piece of sky where I just want to bring that down. So you're going to see this one actually affects quite a lot the background. It's going to make the colors pop a lot more if you're bringing this one down. Then go in saturation, and we're just going to bring this up a little bit too. So now if we compare before and after, we see that the colors are popping a lot more, but we didn't go in extreme. Like you wouldn't want to go, if we select this one here, you really don't want to go inside of saturation and push saturation to max. This doesn't look good. You really want to try to bring some saturation, but not too much. So now once you're satisfied with this result, you can come here, we can select to apply the edit. Then we can go in our next tool, which is going to be the healing brush. So if we look inside of the shot here and I zoom inside, oops, that's an error, and use 2 fingers to zoom, we're going to see here that there's a plane that passed by. So I'm going to zoom in as much as possible, and I'm just going to erase the line right here of the plane passing by because it's a little bit annoying to have this. So the healing brush is going to allow us to remove this. And one thing you have, like the cloud right here, you don't want to create one straight line through the cloud and the sky. You actually want to only select here the part I was with the cloud, so you can really get that done correctly. Oops, again, I selected by accident. Then we can come here, get this done, continue here, and I think we're done here. Yeah, that seems pretty good. So if we zoom out now, we're going to see we don't have the annoying little line anymore in the sky of this plane passing by. So if you're happy with this, you can select and apply this setting. The next one we're going to do is go in a crop. So I think it's going to be beneficial to crop it a little bit. So here we're going to select the original aspect ratio. And if we go here, I'm just going to crop it. So we get a little bit less of the corner. So like there's dead space on this side and there's some dead space on this side too. So I'm probably just going to bring it up, and there's a little bit too much in the foreground. So I'm just going to bring the edit here. Use my rule of thirds to place the car on one of the thirds, and then apply the setting right here, which is a better crop in my opinion. Now if we compare quickly the original shot, if you long press, this is the original raw, and if we let go, this is our edit. So you can see it's quite different from the beginning. Now if we come back here, I actually want to go back in the develop module. So if you come here, you can actually go back and edit some of the settings you previously applied. And we can come here inside of develop. We can select here to edit it. And from here, we can actually go back inside of the settings here. I want to bring up the shadows just a little bit more, even if I said I didn't want to have the shadows up too much. Something like that I would say is pretty good. I still want to have a little bit more detail in the front here. Then one thing you need to remember, if you go inside of the different versions here, you want to come back and reapply all these settings on the picture. And then if we go back, we have this edit. So this is the original, this is the final one. So now we're ready to export the picture here. So we can come here, click save. It's going to take a few seconds for the picture to export. It's applying all our different effects. The more effects we apply, the more it's going to be complex. And we're ready to view the picture. Now if we compare the results we got, this is the original Google edit, automatic edit, and this is our edit. So we can see we have a little bit more color inside of the sky, and I think the overall composition is a little bit better. And also I find in this shot that the foreground was a little bit too distracting, and here we got it a little bit darker, so it's not as distracting anymore. One thing that annoys me a little bit with Snapseed is that once you're finished with your edit, you cannot go back and edit it again. You need to start over from scratch each time. And this is the main reason where I usually use Lightroom, which I will cover in a video in 2 weeks. If you enjoyed this video, please hit this like button right below to let me know you enjoyed it, and consider subscribing to learn more about photography and filmmaking. See you in the next one. Bye bye.